The way we got Roastar started was looking at and discovering who coffee roasters were and what their problems were.
You're going to get unmatched, legendary customer experience here from start to finish.
Roastar has evolved a ton over the last few years. We've invested in new equipment and technologies. We have really put a lot of effort into continuous improvement out on the shop floor.
What I'm most proud of with Roastar is I love how they seek cutting-edge technology.
We also make things that are really cool for really cool customers too.
We're really interested in getting to know our customer and discovering what we can do to help them out.
Sounds great.
Great. So, hey there, everyone. Welcome to the Coffee People Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Woldt. This show is presented by Roastar Coffee Packaging, found online at roastar.com. Coffee People Podcast is part of our Roast West Coast Coffee Network. You can go to our website at coffeepeoplepodcast.com. You'll find recaps of this show, our Coffee Smarter podcast, so much more. And if you haven't poured yourself a cup of coffee yet, now is the time to get started. Our guest today is Tim Williams. You can find him online at Tim. What's your email address? I got the wrong thing written down here.
Probably Instagram is probably the best place to hit me up. Either through the World AeroPress Championship or at Tim Styles is my personal account.
We'll make sure we have all of those in our podcast notes where you can just click the link. You don't have to think about it too hard. Welcome to the Coffee People Podcast, Tim. I appreciate you being here. You didn't mention it, I think, but you're also the founder of Fieldwork Coffee. You're the director of the AeroPress World Championships. You have this long, prestigious resume. So my only real question for you is, who are you?
And that's the question I ask myself every day. In simple terms, I guess a coffee person, and a coffee person who's been knocking around in the industry for a fair while now. I would say I'm one of the luckier people in coffee, being in the right place at the right time on a number of occasions that all led to the situation I'm in today, which is, as you sort of outlined, running the World AeroPress Championship, which I've been doing for 10 or 11 years, and running my own roasting business here in Melbourne, Australia, called Fieldwork Coffee. Those two things can be reasonably busy, and then also being a father of three keeps the rest of life pretty occupied as well.
I'm a father of one dog, and that is more than plenty for me. You know, all of that is obviously stuff going on in your life right now, but I'm hoping we can go back in time a little bit and talk about what was your first kind of memory of coffee, or your first experience that kind of made you think, oh, this is something that it's piqued my interest.
Yeah, there's actually a few sort of milestone moments. I first started drinking coffee purely as a functional beverage. I was always into Formula One car racing, which, if you live in Australia, is not on at 2 p.m. It's on at 11 p.m. The races start, and they tend to go to about 1 a.m. For most of the races around the world. So was there like a 14-year-old, 15-year-old wanting to stay up on a Sunday night and watch Formula One racing? Really the only way that was possible was by waiting until mum and dad went to bed, busting open the cupboard, finding a jar of Nescafe instant coffee, and it's probably 3 spoons coffee, 3 spoons sugar, and then a hell of a lot of milk to try and counteract the taste. But that was like really, a lot of people have a lot more romantic stories about how they got into coffee, but mine was purely like a functional thing. Just as a beverage that I drank, I didn't really particularly care about it beyond its functional benefits. But then when I was 18, I was moving to Melbourne from my hometown, which is about an hour away, and going to university. And I needed a bit of kind of walking around money for the week, and I needed a part-time job, and saw a job advertised for a coffee maker. I thought that sounds really easy. I'd done a 2-hour course as part of like a hospitality program, and thought, well, I already know how to do that as well. So that's a no-brainer. I'll go and do that. I applied for the job. I slept through the interview. I called the owner of this shop at 10 in the morning or something when the interview was at 8:30, and said, all right, I slept through. There's probably no point in me coming and talking to you, is there? And he said, no, probably not. But I'm here till 11, so if you can make it down, we'll have a chat. And he must have been very desperate because he gave me the job anyway. And I don't think I was ever late again.
You proved at the beginning how much you needed that job.
Obviously. And I ended up working there for quite a while. It was a pretty old school, like Italian place. It was actually a bratwurst stall at the Queen Victoria Market here in Melbourne. But it just happened to serve 500, 600, 700 cups of coffee a day as well. Tiny, tiny little space, huge volumes out of there, and a family-run Italian business. And I learned so much there about being organised, about having standards, about managing your stock in and out, presenting, facing up shelves to look amazing. Like, it would be really easy to say it's a bratwurst shop at the Queen Vic Market. It's just like some sausages and coffee. But the way that business operated was, really inspiring. And I really enjoyed going there every day, making coffee, working in hospitality, starting work at 5, all of that kind of thing. And uni, I just wasn't enjoying. So the sort of the seesaw between the two started to sit much more into the work category, and I pretty much just stopped going to uni and started going to work instead. So that was sort of like my launch into coffee as something I got paid for and a career, or more at that point, probably just more of a job and something that I did for money, but outside of work, I didn't think about coffee very much apart from brewing coffee at home to drink.
Was there any pushback from the family about leaning away from university and into coffee? I think about that.
Horrified. Completely. Yeah, completely. So my mum was a teacher and my dad was an engineer, and, pretty traditional, pretty safe employment histories. And the idea that I would drop out of university to make coffee for a living, it was not particularly high on their list of things that they thought was a good idea. I think they still think it's a bit like, at some point I'll get a real job.
But something must have caught you. Where did you kind of go from there? You have a job and you've been working for a while. What makes you think I'm going to take this to the next step? I'm going to invest part of myself into this and make it what I do.
There was a point when I was living in a neighborhood here in Melbourne called East Brunswick, and driving to a job somewhere else every day. And depending on the route that I would take, I would go past this place that I assumed was a cafe. There was no signage at the front. There was just some wooden boxes that were seating, and there were lots of incredibly cool looking people hanging around, bustling in there. This is sort of before takeaway coffee was a big thing. So 90% of the coffee was have in. So it wasn't like people streaming out with takeaway coffee cups to really let you know this was a coffee place. But one day I decided, okay, I'm early for work. I'm just going to stop. I'm going to see what this place is all about. And I went in, and it was bustling, whole bunch of people behind the counter, every seat taken. And I didn't really know where to go. I felt really out of place. And there was a till, and went up to the till and said, I'll just get a flat white to take away. I'm like, yeah, and there's like 3 people standing behind the espresso machine, and the espresso machine's got this thing up over on the top of it, and it looked pretty different to me than like all the cafes that I knew or the places that I'd been working. And there was a real energy in there. Got the coffee, walked out the front. I was 4 steps out the door. I took a sip, and it was just like, what is this? Like, this is not the drink that I've been drinking everywhere else. This is another thing. You know, it was the texture of the milk, the temperature, just like the silkiness of it, the balance. Like, I was just like, that was like the first like epiphany moment, realizing that coffee as a product is not this like commoditized, just like everything that just sort of tastes like roasty flavor and milky excuses. This was actually something that was really, really delicious. So I pestered them for a job, and they hired me, and that was probably the point where the real interest in coffee and the idea that beyond just like making sure that the basket's clean and making sure you tamp properly, there are things that you can do to take coffee to the next level, and then the next level, and the level after that. This was probably the first shop in Australia that had a PID machine, controller on the Lamazoco Linear, which was like from JCar Electronics or something, like bolted to the side, and it was, you know, pretty like Frankenstein. And it was at that place that, you know, that knowledge started to develop. And I guess probably more curiosity than knowledge, because knowledge suggests that there were answers, but there were definitely a lot of questions being raised about coffee.
Sure.
Yeah. So that was the big epiphany moment that was like, oh, this is actually a thing that's really interesting, and that I think I can like sink my teeth into.
You know, you as a guest, it's hard for me on this side to say, where should we focus on this? And, you know, you've Workshop Coffee, Square Mile, Intelligentsia, working with, I'm gonna say this incorrectly, but the Cafe Kitsune, is that right?
Yeah, that's perfect. That right. Yeah.
You know, now with Fieldwork, the real reason I was excited to talk to you today, not just the only reason, but one of them, is the World AeroPress Championship. So you're welcome to come back on the show 10 times. We can talk about everything else, but I think we should kind of skip ahead to the World AeroPress Championships and just start with, I've got mine here. It's fairly well worn.
Oh, look at that.
Yep, this is the first one of the first brewers I ever bought for myself when I got into specialty. Now I use it with the Prisma attachment quite a bit in the morning. And what is it about this thing that sparked enough interest that you thought, oh, this is, not only am I interested in this, but I'm going to get involved in this competition circuit thing, which started off pretty small.
It started off tiny. Yeah, absolutely. So the kind of the quick distillation history of the World AeroPress Championship is that in 2008, it was started by 2 other people who are not me. Both of them were and still are named Tim too. So that got a little bit confusing for a lot of people. But it was started by Tim Wendelbo and Tim Varney in Norway, in Oslo in Norway, when the AeroPress had just come out onto the market. And basically this coffee brewer had come out. It had a lot of potential. No one really knew how to use it. If you followed the instructions on the packet, I mean, it made coffee, but not the kind of coffee that we were sort of getting excited about at that time. Lighter roast, more nuanced, more elegant coffee. So the 2 teams decided, let's work out how we can find the best recipe for this by opening up to a few people. We'll make it a bit of fun. 3 people will compete. Whoever brews the best cup of coffee will be the World AeroPress Champion. So a little bit of a dig at the US Major League Baseball, which has their World Series open only to teams from the United States.
Yep.
So that was the genesis of it, and it felt like over the next few years became something of a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, in that people in Sweden and Denmark said, that looks kind of cool. Like, can we do it as well? And they said, yeah, go for it. And then maybe 20 people would get together and brew coffee at a trade show or something like that, and they'd get a trophy. Tim Wendelbo had stepped out pretty early on, and Tim Varney was just running it. He was a good friend of mine at the time, and he would get me to judge at different events, and I would be there thinking, like, this is really incredible. Like, this has got a lot of energy behind it. This is creating a lot of value for AeroPress. Super fun. This is great. And then one year Tim said, like, this, you know what, this thing is just like taking too much of my time. It's kind of now costing me money to do it. I'm just gonna shut it down. It struck me that there was a lot of opportunity there to grow it, but we probably just had to get a bit serious about putting some well thought out rules in place and putting some structure in place, and turning around to AeroPress and saying, we think this is creating a lot of value for you. Like, we're going to need some support to keep growing this. What can we do? So,
what was their reaction initially?
They're like, great, let's do it. Like, it was.
Why didn't you ask us sooner?
A little bit like that. Back at that stage, there was a guy named Alex who was the business manager of AeroPress, and he'd been with the company 30 years, 25 years, 30 years. AeroPress was also called Aerobi at the time, was a toy manufacturer.
Mm-hmm.
And he was the one who, when Alan invented this like coffee brewer, he was the one who said, hey, the toys are cool, whatever, but this is the thing that's going to be massive. And it turned out to be that Alan did very well out of the toys, but he did exceptionally well. Big level money out of the AeroPress. So it was Alex who identified that the AeroPress was a real commercial opportunity, and he was our biggest supporter in the company. Whatever we needed, sort of within reason, we would work really closely with him. Alex was who we called the young guy at the company, because Alan was maybe 80 or so at the time, but Alex was like 75. And he, despite, being sort of well beyond the point at which, my parents had retired, he got it, and he really saw the opportunity and was really willing to back us and support us. So my vision for the AeroPress Championship was that we needed to build out the sponsorship side of it to make it sustainable, because there's no point if it's like the most amazing thing in the world, but it's a nightmare and it only lasts for 1 year. So we wanted to make it sustainable. We wanted to make it a program that could offer value for the hosts, offer value for the sponsors, offer some value for the spectators going along, but make it like unbelievably fun and rewarding for the competitors to participate in. So about 10, 11 years ago, I got involved and started building out, I guess, the business side of it. And we've grown now to 65 countries we hold events in. We have something like 150 events, individual events happen each year under our umbrella, and about 6,000, just over 6,000 competitors in the 2024 season. So wow. It's grown a lot in size, and we've had to like grow up with it and become more legitimate in a lot of different ways. But what we've always kept at the heart of it is that we want it to be completely, unequivocally like rewarding for competitors to be involved in. Even if you get knocked out in the first round, we want you to wake up the next morning and say, I can't wait to go in AeroPress again. So that's been our guiding edict, and we've tried to really nurture that community, support that community, because we figure that, the day the competitors don't want to show up anymore is the day that, the sponsors walk away, the hosts walk away, the whole, house of cards collapses at that point. We need to keep our community of competitors and participants really strong, and we haven't always done that perfectly, but we we use that as our North Star for all our decision making.
Sure. I should point out I use Tim Wendelbo's recipe when I brew AeroPress in the morning, which I got from the AeroPress app. There's certainly a lot of
Perfect.
resources out there.
Yeah, that's like the 12 gram to 200, like that kind of.
I think 14 to
stuff.
200, yeah. And I also do with the Prisma. Then I make a little like espresso like, I call it espresso adjacent tasting shot in the morning.
Very cool.
Over 10 years, you must have seen just a lot of changes, and obviously managing growth is always a challenge to not get into this movement piece of your job, of your career, right? Like constantly moving forward and forgetting to like stay invested in today, right? That's always a challenge. When you walk into kind of a larger, or the end of season AeroPress Championship, what is that like for you to look around and think, oh, I'm part of this, building this?
It's probably only in the last couple of years that I've taken the time to step back and appreciate that and feel rewarded by that. That weekend, it's now the World AeroPress Championship final now runs over 3 days, and it's a pretty intense 3 days. It's pretty hectic, and so it can be hard to use that opportunity to reflect and to enjoy it and to be present in the moment. My role in the actual world final remains being stage manager and coordinator. So that's pretty hectic, moving all the competitors around and making sure judges are in the right places, and I'm backstage with a headset, all of that kind of thing. But my role kind of finishes as soon as the 3 finalists go onto the stage. If I get the right 3 people, I get them together, I get them the coffee, and I get them onto the stage, then there's nothing left for me to do. At that point, I drop the headset and I usually walk out into the crowd where most people don't recognize me, and I stand there as a spectator and watch. So I did this first in Vancouver in 2022 when we had this amazing venue. And that was a really rewarding moment. 2023, I did the same thing with when we were here in Melbourne, and the nice thing was that my entire family could be there. So I got to stand there with Gerard, the CEO of AeroPress, and my family on the other side and really enjoy that moment. When we were in Lisbon, just September last year, I took the headset off. I went to walk out into the crowd, and I couldn't find any space to see the stage. It was the whole space was so packed that I did a lap. I went upstairs. I went to the balconies. I went back down to the floor. I'm like, well, I've got the right pass. I'm going to go back on the stage and watch it from there. And at that point, we brought all the competitors up onto the stage to watch the final round and the presentation from there. So it's not something that I did in the early days. In the early days, when we finished the World Championship in 2018 in Sydney, there was a big after party. Got everyone organised at the after party. My wife and I were staying at a hotel in Sydney. We got back to the hotel at 11:30, 12 o'clock, something like that. She went to bed, and I opened the laptop and I sat down and I got to work on the 2019 season. That was sort of like doable and healthy at the time. But these days I'm able to sort of disconnect from that enough to be like, that can at least wait until the morning. There are other things that could be considered.
That's something I actually talk about with my therapist, Wendy, on a regular basis, is if you're doing your own thing, if you're your own boss or you're running a business, in some cases a business with people who are depending on you, and you're certainly a big team, you can't just turn it off because the clock says a certain time or because the event is over, because you've got to be able to turn your brain off somehow, or turn its attention somewhere else for a few moments. Because you're doing this with the World AeroPress Championships, and you also have your own roaster and Fieldwork, and you have your family, how do you find balance, or do you? Is it even possible?
I feel like there are days that are balanced, and then there are days that are just all over the shop. How do we find balance? I don't know that I've got a good answer for that, because sometimes you just have to do what you have to do.
Sure.
I think these days we're pretty good, and it really sort of actually came out of the COVID pandemic. We're pretty good at 6:30 p.m. the workday cuts off, and we all sit down to dinner together. That's a really important thing, and generally we're not picking up work stuff after that point. So that's been probably more of like a psychological shift and an operational shift. Pre-COVID, if I missed bath time, the kids were a lot younger then, but if I missed bath time and missed bedtime, well, then it didn't matter if I was home at 8:30, 9:30, 10:30 or midnight. I could stay in the office till whenever, and I often did. The funny thing is, I'm not sure that I was any more productive then with that 14-hour, 16-hour workday than I am now working a much more reasonable kind of amount of time.
There's this value to letting your brain marinate on things in the background, I think. I don't know how it works exactly, but I know that when I'm talking to you or I'm, spending time with the dog or my wife or walking to the beach, there's always something going on back there, even if I'm not totally aware of it. And it'll come out later at the weirdest times, usually when I don't have a pen to write it down.
Okay.
How long has Fieldwork been open, or how long have you been pursuing that roaster?
So Fieldwork's been around about coming up to 3 years in April, and we are a very small micro roaster. So we roast only about 1,000 pounds of coffee a week out of a really small space with a coffee shop attached to it. And then we have one other coffee bar in the city as well. It's been nearly 3 years, and was definitely Fieldwork was sort of the end result of a longer journey. When we first moved back to Melbourne after 10, 11 years away in London and LA and consulting in Paris, when I moved back to Melbourne, I didn't want to open a roastery straight away. I really wanted to get a sense of what the market was all about, get a bit established. Like I said, we've been away for 10, 11 years. We relocated home. We had a 2.5-year-old. We had twins on the way. We were moving the World AeroPress Championship and starting a new business. I thought going straight into a roastery in Melbourne probably doesn't make a lot of sense. So we actually first ran a co-roasting space. And there were aspects of that were really good, and there were aspects of that were just horrible and demoralizing. When I said before I was like the luckiest person in coffee, being at the right place at the right time, I was a person hanging out at Square Mile when only James and Annette worked there, and sweeping the floor and putting stickers on bags, and that turned into a job working at Square Mile. I was the housemate of someone who got a job at as the director of education for Intelligentsia Coffee based in Chicago when they were looking for a manager to move to LA and open the Venice location. I got the phone call. I had all this opportunity to work alongside some really inspiring people who put quality at a really high priority level. And then when we opened the Roasting Collective here in Melbourne, I was just amazed because I'd never worked at a mid-tier, low-tier roastery. I didn't know what was deemed acceptable in a lot of operations. It never occurred to me that if you ran out of the Kenyan component that you were supposed to be roasting, that you just stick something else in because no one's really going to know the difference. Like, that does not happen at Square One. That did not happen at Workshop. That does not happen at Tim Wendelboe. Like, so it was a little bit like, oh my God, I got my fingerprints all over this thing. And I think a lot of what's happening here is like awful. Like, it was one of our objectives with the Roasting Collective was that if you get more closely connected to your coffee, that you start to care a lot more, that you want to know more about how it's grown, that you want to buy better, that you won't accept past crop or agey coffees, that you'll really, get on that journey to push your standards. And maybe 1 in 30 clients had that motivation. And for most of the rest, what our business got used as was, how do we cut our costs? How cheap can we get our coffee to be, under the banner of we're doing it with these experts? And that just was not fun. Financially, the business was great. It was flying and doing really well. But the prospect of getting up every day to put all of my energy into helping to create coffee that I would not drink if you paid me, just felt horrible. So basically the decision was, I'm sort of trying to lead from the back. I'm trying to like help create these expectations and opportunities for other people. And I just had enough of it. So Fieldwork was born out of that, to put front and center the kinds of coffees that we think literally are the best in the world. Buying in a forward contracting way as much as possible, working in a direct way as much as possible, sourcing, roasting, iterating profiles to a really high standard, and then presenting them to customers that care. So that's why it's not a massive business, because we only buy washed processed coffees. We only roast, really from a pretty narrow altitude range and a pretty narrow varietal range also, because these are the coffees that we adore. We don't have the approach of, we should have a little bit for everyone and something to please everyone and that kind of thing. We really are just focused on the coffees that we think are super enjoyable, daily drinker coffees. Very rarely is something at a tier that requires a special label or special pricing, but the kind of like well-grown, sustainable varietals, washed process, clean, elegant coffees that I thought all these other people should be doing and they weren't. So I was like, you know what, we'll just do it.
It's a real great benefit to somebody's career, maybe retrospectively, when you have a manager or owners that care and that give you an example to follow. What you're saying about leaving some of those places and realizing not everyone has that same motivation is certainly something I went through. And you're like, wait a minute, why aren't you doing it this extra step? It's not that much harder and it makes it so much better. But not everybody is motivated by the same things, or they didn't have the same examples. I want to just point out, you mentioned luck as it being in the right place with the right people, but you're part of that chain too, right? Like Jared Linsmeyer is the founder of Ruby Coffee in the Midwest. He was a guy who, was a busboy at that Venice location of Intelligentsia, I think at one point, and was just kind of showing up and hoping for more, and now runs a very well-respected roastery that I believe does things in a way that makes me proud to be from that area. So you're creating, those expectations for a new generation of people. And I don't mean to call you out. I think, I'm in my 40s, but all of a sudden your career is a lot longer than you realize, right? You've got all these different steps and all these different places and all these different people that you've connected with. And on the other side of that, you were touching base with people. I'm a little soapboxy here. I apologize, everyone. But, it's just the connection that coffee is, and a lot of industries are, but I think coffee in particular, because there is this emphasis in certain aspects of specialty on both it's the coffee and it's the people and it's what we do with it. And so it's interesting to hear you mention that, and then in my head start making connections with other people I've spoken to on the show. Roastar, I mentioned at the top, they are a big supporter and collaborator on this show. And one of the things they've asked for me is to ask our guests, for advice for other people in the industry, kind of like I'm just saying right now. So that it leads into, I'm wondering if you have, as the leader, I know you can't give away too many secrets, but the leader of the World AeroPress Champion, the director, I should say, any advice for competitors on how to step into this next 2025 season?
Absolutely. Yeah, my advice for competitors every year is to go in it to have fun. You win a lot if you win, right? There's prestige, there's a trophy. George, who won in 2024, we're taking to Colombia in May to visit coffee producers, and he's a home barista, so he doesn't even work in coffee. This is not something that was really on his agenda for his life, was to be the world's best coffee brewer in this particular division and then go all expenses paid to Colombia. There is a lot that you win, and you should definitely be wanting to win to get involved. But it's not a winner-takes-all value proposition for competitors. The other, 63 competitors that came to the World Final in Lisbon, most of them had an amazing time, made 60 new friends, learned a lot about Lisbon coffee culture, about the coffee culture of the person who was next to them in the competitor prep area, really got connected to a global community that they are an indelible part of. And if you go in there with that mindset of being part of that experience and connecting to the people at the regional level, at the national level, and then hopefully at the world level, you're going to, whether you place first, second, third, or 50th, you're actually going to walk away from that year with a wealth of experience, a wealth of connections that you really won't have the chance to cultivate in any other way. So absolutely, it is good to work on your recipe, to brew really tasty coffee, to get everything that you can out of the coffee that's part of the competition. You should absolutely be doing that. But make sure you're doing the other 50% as well, which is coming along to the welcome event, getting to know the people who you're competing against. They're really only adversaries in the cup of coffee. They're your allies in almost every other facet of your life. So getting to know them, there is so much value for you to extract outside of just winning the competition itself.
How much do you engage with this competitive circuit, the community of the AeroPress community, when it's not at an event? I mean, is there a lot of back and forth between you and or your team and the people out there, or is it kind of you come to the event and that's where our bandwidth ends?
No, we are now a 12-month-a-year operation. It used to be that there was an off season, but there isn't any longer. Actually, there hasn't been for a few years now. Because we license events in 65 countries, we're also doing, I won't announce too much, but I'll give a little teaser. We're actually going to be doing something in the US this year that'll be really exciting as well for the 20th anniversary of the AeroPress itself. We work all year round. Apart from I take a couple of weeks in January for getting off the island time with the family and actually disconnecting, but all the rest of the time we're on. The most important thing, well, not the most important thing, but something that I think a lot of people fail to understand about the World AeroPress Championship is that it's the whole thing is run by two people. So the entire network, all of the sponsorship, all of the event planning, all of the hosting relationships are managed by Grant Gamble, who has been my partner on the AeroPress Championship for a number of years now, and me. And we coordinate the whole thing together. We obviously have support from AeroPress and from our sponsors. When we do events, we pull together a team of we call them volunteers, but we also make sure they get paid. Paid volunteers, is that a thing? We bring together a team to actually do the event delivery at the World Final. But the rest of the year, it's just the two of us. So we're intimately connected with our hosts around the world. Just this morning, I'm answering questions with our host in Poland. He's looking at expanding. We just approved events in Iran and Armenia for the year. It's constant back and forth with our host network.
Where can people go to find information on becoming part of the upcoming competitions or the regional competitions? Is there a website? Is it social media, Discord? Where should they go?
Yeah, so either to our Instagram account, which is aero.press or aero.press, or to World AeroPress Championship.com. Both of them are going to get you to a page where you can express your interest in becoming a host or find out where local events are happening around you. We work on a regional to national to worlds sort of structure. So you can, in most places, find an event not too far away from you. We're still working on Africa. We don't have as much coverage there as we'd like. But like in Poland, for example, like there's 22 regionals take place in Poland. So there is one, no matter where you are in Poland, there's one near you. So yeah, that social media account or our website are going to be a great place to find more information.
That 2 weeks that you get away, or that couple of weeks in January, I'm not going to ask where you go or what you're doing. I want to stay, out of your personal life there. But I do want to know is if you're away from home and you stop into a coffee shop, that looks pretty good, what do you order?
It really depends on the shop. So I'm a really big filter coffee drinker, but there are definitely shops where you're taking your life into your hands by going for something as unadulterated as pure filter coffee. As simple as it is to make, we know that with filter coffee, like 90% of the equation is set with what's inside the bag. And if that's rough, if it's the naturally processed coffee, that's not my style. So like if I feel like they're in tune, if they know what coffees are on their menu, then I'll go down the filter route. But generally, I'll order a milk drink, like a milk-based drink, because I think your likelihood of getting something that's like reasonably enjoyable is much higher with a milk-based beverage than it is with filter coffee.
You just said something that struck a chord, which is if they know what coffees are on their menu. I can't express how many times I'm surprised when I ask a barista or a server a question, something simple on their menu, or how they prepare it or cook something. I know you have quite a appreciation for food as well, and they're like, oh, I have no idea, and I'm like, is it because you don't care? Is it because your management didn't teach you? What happened to this point where you were at a table or at a counter and you said, well, I don't know, and you just kind of left it at that? It always surprises me.
Well, let me put a question back to you then. Like in that, and I have that situation happen all the time, and I think it's really unfortunate. And then I come to the conclusion that it's like, well, I'm the outlier, because if this was happening 4 or 5 times a day, surely the managers would do something like a post-it note on the Square console or something like that. That's like, the coffee's from Brazil.
There's a lot of factors that I think go into it. I think I'm more empathetic to it now than I would have been when I was running a place, say 10 years ago, where I would have been furious. I would have been like, what
Mm.
is the problem? We need to work on this. Why are you not caring as much as I'm caring?
Mm.
And I think now I'm more aware that, one, people have a lot going on. This might not be my server's primary focus. Maybe they're a student or a parent or a whatever. Maybe it was just as simple as they walked in the door, got thrown on the floor, and I was the first person they talked to. And so I try not to take it too much to heart. I just ask the questions that I want to know and, hope to get an answer. I think when I go to a place where they do clearly care or their staff is well educated on their products, it's what makes me come back.
Mm.
There's so many places now in all industries. I don't go back to a place just because they're convenient. I want to have a good experience. And if I'm going to go out and spend my money, of which I don't have a ton of, I
Yeah.
want to make sure that it's worth it. I'll pay the
Yeah.
extra money for the good experience or the good product now. And
Mm.
that might be a product of aging. I think COVID had something to do with that, where we became a little more appreciative. On the other side, it hurt the workforce, at least here where I am. More places were opening than people were staying in the industry because they found other careers when things were shut down, or they realized, hey, I don't want to do that anymore. And
Yeah.
we're still waiting on that next generation to come up.
Yeah.
So I think
Are
there's
they
a lot of
coming?
that.
That's the question. Are they coming
Uh,
though? Yeah,
I
that's
think
another
they're,
podcast.
yeah, that is a whole, but I think they're starting off looking at entrepreneurship earlier than maybe I
Mm.
did, or, someone in their 40s might have, because they're seeing it every second of every day on their phone of other people who are doing some sort of hustle. And we're also at a weird time where, unfortunately, it's hard to have a one income family. Everybody's got multiple things going at some point. And, that's another conversation too, when you get into the economics and politics of it. But I think for me, I'm empathetic to my servers. I believe that, there's just a lot going on in their lives. But at the same time, if I'm going to go back, it's going to be because the service was good and the product was good. It's those two
Mm.
things.
Mm.
And
Can I ask
maybe I'll,
another follow up on
of
that?
course, I got
On
nothing else
that.
to do.
Yeah, we're flipping the roles a little bit, but I
No,
think
no.
that's okay. When you go into that, like, let's say it's a coffee shop experience, and you go in and you call it drip coffee. Like, what coffee do you have on drip today?
Mhm.
Like here it's called batch. Like, what do you have on batch? Is it better to be told, I'm not sure, I'm not really sure, or for them to make up something that's like completely wrong or inaccurate? Like, do you have a preferred?
Oh yeah, I do. And it's actually option C, which would be, I'm not sure. Let me find out.
Yeah,
I'll wait.
yeah, yeah.
Where I get frustrated is when they say, I don't know. And then the conversation ends,
Yeah. I don't know, small or large. Like,
we're probably
yeah.
not the business that we're in, whether it's the biggest coffee shop on the, in the community or not. It's probably not good. You're not gonna have to go far to find a bag or whatever it is that
Hmm.
you're brewing. Somebody near you is brewing that coffee and knows what it is.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think service is about providing people with the information they need and giving them the feeling that you care. If you don't,
Yeah,
I'll forgive a lot if I think the person is trying and they care.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
We have there's a roaster that has a coffee experience place up the street here, and one of my staff, who's a really experienced coffee person himself, went in there, and it was like, this was like such a good lesson in like reading the room. Like, they were there with friends, just to get coffee and whatever, and they ordered espresso, and the espresso got brought over, and so like, great, and he sat down with his espresso, and he's gone to take a sip, and the guy's like, oh, no, whoa, like you can't drink it until I've told you. Our guy is like, oh, I've drunk espresso before, thank you. Like, there's like giving people the information they want, and then there's burying people in information or like a spiel that they never asked for and are not in the mood for. We try and make sure that our team are like really like, you don't have to talk to them about coffee. If they don't want to talk about coffee, great. Take a 3-minute breather and talk about something else. Like, talk about their dog, talk about, their bike that they parked up out the front, or their football team, or, just talk to them, like take an interest. And there's a real selfish motivation in that too, that like they might turn out to be, I got chatting to a customer a few weeks ago, who was a regular customer who always comes in and orders what's called a Magic. I don't know if you've even heard about this. It's a drink in Australia. Anyway, that's a whole other episode. And I got chatting to him about the fact that he ordered this drink called a Magic and blah, blah, blah. And we talked about, I used to spend a lot of time in London, and we got chatting, and he turned out to be the main guy in a band that was like huge in my, lifetime of music appreciation. And he was a regular customer. I just never had made that connection in any other way apart from just talking and engaging. So I say to our team, it's like you never know where your next like free haircut is coming from, or like, you're going to cut the line at the bar down the street like on Friday night because you're engaging. Like, we're not just here to like facilitate a caffeine transaction. Like, get to know these people. Like, it's good for the business, it's great for the customer, but like there's also really something in it for you too, and it makes the day a lot more enjoyable.
Yeah, it reinforces this belief that we are connected to others when it's so easy to be not connected. And to me, what you just described is the difference between what I would call a big box coffee shop, corporate coffee versus a specialty coffee shop. A corporate coffee shop employee's job is to sell me coffee and move me out as fast as they can. They can try to sell me more coffee, but in a very quick pace. They don't, and that's not a reflection on that employee. That's the business's ethos. It's how they do things. Specialty coffee shop is, we talk about community, but it really is that, because a lot of our customers are not moving in and moving out very quickly. Some of them are, and that's great. They just go into work or whatever they're doing, but a lot of them become the people. This might be their only engagement during the entire day. This might be the one time they get out of the house. This might be the thing they do on the way to the grocery, or when they're taking 2 minutes away from their kids. And as the barista or the owner of your cafe, you get a chance to engage with them and be like, oh man, this is kind of a cool community that we're part of. And sometimes you think, oh, these people are not that great either. There's both sides. But, that's the difference to me between specialty and corporate. And, depending on where you fall and what you want in your life, that's what you'll choose.
I agree 100%. And I think, I don't know if you know Kyle Glanville, who he was at Intelli. He employed me at Intelli, and he went on to do G&B and Go Get 'Em Tiger in LA. And he had a lot of guiding principles, but like one of the key ones was that like the coffee bar should be like where you like pony up and like check in with your neighborhood. Like that's like a key function of the coffee bar space, and it's something that I've always like really internalized and held on to, because it's like that's like such a crucial thing that we don't have as much anymore. Like, Australia is a very car based culture, and you get into your car, your hermetically sealed box, and you drive to the next spot. You don't really interact with people, not like you do in London on the tube or walking or that kind of thing. And because there's that less of that like human to human, even just like proximity, being able to create that in a coffee bar and being able to like embrace that in a coffee bar space is really powerful, and creates a great energy. But you have to nurture it, and you have to design for it, and you have to train for how you accommodate that too. But if you get those things right, and I'm definitely not saying that Fieldwork like gets that right all the time, but if you get that right, what you create is something that transcends, like a airport coffee service, and becomes like really a part of the fabric of that community. And that's sort of something that we try and keep in mind with Fieldwork. And if we're opening new shops, that's definitely a factor that we look at.
And that's a lot of that will be the team that you build, and building them in a reflection of that, right? Pro tip,
Absolutely.
if you ever fly into San Diego and you need a cup of coffee, there's a coffee shop there, a pretty good name coffee shop, but the line will be a couple hundred people deep. And the brewery next door also serves the same coffee, but there's never a huge line there. So you can go and sit at the bar and get your cup of coffee instead of waiting in line.
Perfect. Is this in the airport itself or outside?
In the airport itself, yeah.
Airport. Okay.
San Diego's a small, big city, so we have this airport that I always think is very easy to get in and out of. People complain about it a lot, but I just go and if I have an early flight, I sit down at the bar and I order a cup of coffee. They open at 6 a.m. It's great.
Perfect. Everyone assumes you've got a slug of whiskey in there as well, but that's on
who's to say I'm not? I'm not going to say one way or another.
Yeah.
Tim, I've been asking guests this because it's something that I've been trying to focus on more in my life since I have the opportunity. But are there any sort of charitable or nonprofit efforts that you support or you encourage others to explore? I know that's something we didn't get a lot of time for today, but is part of your life.
So right now, the charitable things that I've been involved in on hiatus, which is, a little unfortunate to say. But for the last 10 years, I've been working with a coffee producer who we've been buying from in Rwanda, and we have run a really small grassroots charity out in the western part of Rwanda, in Karongi, where his coffee washing station is. And it was a project we called the Gatesi Project. The basic premise being that so much of the smallholder farmer economy and domestic economy was based upon selling cherries, and either sold cherries and it went well, they didn't sell cherries and it went badly. And I got approached by a coffee festival in Manchester about 10 or 11 years ago to say, we want to donate our door sales, our ticket sales, to a grassroots coffee project that really benefits coffee farmers. What do you think we should do? And I said, I've got absolutely no idea, but I make it easy, who runs a washing station in Rwanda, who I visit, occasionally. I reckon he'll know. And so what he put forward was that there's a really well-established program or approach in Rwanda called a Garinka program, which is where you take funds and you buy dairy cows and you gift those dairy cows to small farming households. The cows produce manure, free organic fertilizer for your coffee trees. They produce milk that you can either use for nourishment for your family, or you can sell the milk for a cash benefit into the household. And under the right conditions, cows produce more cows. So we started that program as a one-off about 11 years ago with a couple $100, and we bought 3 cows or something like that. And then my wife really encouraged me to put more effort into it and to try and grow the program a bit. So over the next 10 years or so, we raised, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but we raised somewhere around $80,000 by working with different roasters around the world, taking the Gatesi green coffee, giving the green coffee to the roaster and saying, sell the coffee as roasted coffee. You keep what you need to cover your costs, and whatever you can contribute back into the program, we'll then use to buy dairy cows. We then had the support of RTC, which is the Rwanda Trading Company, who are the exporter of the coffee, who backed up the program with veterinarian support for the cows that were put in place. So building structures, sending the vet around to make sure that the cows are doing well. We got up to the point of 90 to 100 cows purchased and donated into this community. Like, there's a lot of cows in this community now. It got to the point where there were so many cows each year that we actually took most of the funds to put towards buying cows, and then we also bought health insurance for 100 of the poorest farmers each year in that area as well. So when COVID hit, the fact that 300 or 400 of these poorest farmers had health insurance that they didn't have previously was like a massive boon. We ran that program for about 10 or 11 years, and as green coffee prices started to climb, as cost of living started to get tougher, we started to find it harder and harder to get the philanthropic response from the roasters that we were working with to keep the program going. And we were really at a tipping point there of needing to commit a lot more time and energy to the program to run it, or to put it into hiatus and say, there is an opportunity here, there's work that we want to do, but we don't know exactly what it is right now. So rather than going through the motion and I think using up goodwill that exists in our roaster network, how do we sit back on this for a little while and think about what we want to do with it next? But that was a project that I was really proud to have been involved in and to help bring to life and make a huge difference to the lives of these coffee farmers. There was also a really big day in the community when the cows were presented, and usually the mayor of the region would come and help do the presentations, and it was pretty amazing. Other charitable projects, reach out to me, hit me up. I'm interested to hear what we can do that would be supportive.
I just like the idea of finding a small area where you really see your impact. There's a lot of it's a reinforcing activity, right? Because you see the people and you get to know them and you see how it impacts their lives and makes it. I don't want to say worth doing. It's all worth doing, whether it's writing a check or it's showing up and volunteering, whatever it is, there's benefit there. But when you can really, spend time year after year with a group, you really get to build relationships. It's no different than building relationships at the coffee shop.
I agree.
What did I miss today? Anything that we wanted to say that you just didn't get a chance to?
Not that comes to mind immediately, but I do feel like we could have talked for 3 or 4 hours pretty easily. I feel like there's a lot in your experience and background that would be really interesting to unpack too.
Well, I'm happy to answer any questions off air. I think the people that listen to the show have heard me talk enough today. I certainly appreciate your time here, and I'm excited to share all the links to the World AeroPress Championships, to Fieldwork, all the other things we've been talking about. To everyone listening, you'll find them in the podcast show notes and our newsletter, which goes out every week from coffeepeoplepodcast.com. And just a reminder, our presenting sponsor is Roastar Coffee Packaging. They've enabled us to tell these stories, and we're eternally grateful for it. Tim, thanks for being here. To everyone else, please tip your baristas and be sure to drink good coffee.
Thanks, Ryan.